The dust rose from beneath her worn leather boots as Ruby Rose trudged the final mile toward Miller's Creek, a tiny speck of civilization in the vast Montana territory of 1878. Her threadbare carpetbag, containing everything she owned in this world, seemed to grow heavier with each step. 3 days ago, she'd had a home. 3 days ago, her father had still been alive. Ruby wiped her brow with the back of her hand, the summer sun beating down mercilessly. Papa's heart had simply given out while he was mending fences, leaving his 19-year-old daughter alone with a mountain of debt and creditors circling like vultures. They'd taken the small ranch, the livestock, and nearly every possession save the clothes on her back, and a few personal items she'd managed to hide. The letter in her pocket, now worn at the creases from repeated reading, promised work as a maid at the Creek's only hotel. Not glamorous work, but honest wages that might someday allow her to rebuild what she'd lost. As Ruby crested the hill, Miller's Creek came into full view. A collection of wooden buildings straddling a dusty main street, with the promised hotel standing 2 stories tall at the far end. Her destination, the town hummed with afternoon activity. Men lounged outside the saloon, their laughter carrying on the breeze. A woman in a fine dress stepped carefully across the street, avoiding mud puddles. Outside the general store, 2 cowboys loaded supplies onto a wagon. One of them, tall and broad-shouldered beneath a well-worn Stetson, glanced up as Ruby approached. For the briefest moment, their eyes met, and something unfamiliar fluttered in her chest. She quickly looked away, adjusting her grip on her carpetbag. "Need help with that, miss?" His voice was deep, resonant. Ruby shook her head without looking up. "Thank you, but I can manage. Suit yourself," he replied, not unkindly. She continued down the street, feeling his gaze follow her. It wasn't the time for distractions. She needed work, stability, a plan for the future, not the complications that came with entertaining a handsome cowboy's attention. Mrs. Finch, the hotel proprietress, was a severe woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and spectacles perched on her nose. She examined Ruby with calculating eyes. "You're smaller than I expected," she said critically. "But I suppose you'll do. $5 a month plus room and board. You'll have Sundays off unless we're especially busy. Work starts at 5 in the morning, ends when the day's tasks are complete." Ruby nodded eagerly. "When can I begin?" "Right now. Martha will show you to your quarters and explain your duties." Martha, a round-faced woman in her 40s, led Ruby to a tiny room at the back of the hotel, barely large enough for the narrow bed and small trunk it contained. "It ain't much," Martha admitted, "but it's clean. Mrs. Finch runs a tight ship, but she's fair. Do your work well and you'll be treated decent." Ruby set down her carpetbag. "It's perfect, thank you." Her first week passed in a blur of endless chores, changing linens, scrubbing floors, polishing silverware, dusting every surface. By nightfall, her hands were raw and her back ached, but she was grateful for the work and the security it provided. On her first Sunday off, Ruby ventured to explore the town. The general store caught her attention, its windows displaying goods she couldn't afford but enjoyed looking at nonetheless. The bell above the door jingled as she entered, and she nodded politely to the shopkeeper before browsing the bolts of fabric, imagining a day when she might have enough saved to make herself a new dress. We meet again. Ruby turned to find the cowboy from her first day in town standing nearby, hat in hand. Up close, she noticed his eyes were the color of a summer sky, bright blue against sun-bronzed skin. "I suppose we do," she replied cautiously. "I'm Quinn O'Malley," he said with a slight tip of his head. "Most folks call me Quinn." Ruby rose. She offered a small curtsy, conscious of her plain dress and hair hastily pinned up. "New in town, Miss Rose?" "Yes, I work at the hotel now." His eyes brightened with recognition. "Ah, so you're Mrs. Finch's new maid. Word travels fast in a small town." "So I've noticed," Ruby replied, moving toward the door. "If you'll excuse me, Mr. O'Malley, I should be going." "Wait." Quinn stepped forward. I don't mean to be forward, but I wonder if you might allow me to escort you to the Sunday social next week. It's at the church, very proper. Good way to meet folks. Ruby hesitated. She hadn't planned on socializing every penny needed to be saved, yet something in his earnest expression made her pause. I appreciate the offer, but I'm afraid I must decline. Disappointment flickered across his face, but he nodded respectfully. Another time, perhaps. As Ruby walked back to the hotel, she found herself regretting her decision. But attachments were luxuries she couldn't afford, not when her future remained so uncertain. The following week brought an unexpected flurry of activity to the hotel. A cattle buyer from Chicago had arrived with his associates, filling the small dining room each evening. Ruby worked longer hours, serving meals alongside her regular duties. On Wednesday evening, as she cleared plates from the dining room, she nearly collided with a new arrival. Looking up, she found herself face to face with Quinn O'Malley. "Careful there," he said, steadying her with a gentle hand on her elbow. "Mr. O'Malley," she acknowledged, fighting a sudden warmth in her cheeks. "I didn't expect to see you here. I've got business with Mr. Peterson, the cattle buyer," Quinn explained, nodding toward a portly gentleman smoking a cigar across the room. "The O'Malley Ranch has 100 head to sell." Ruby's eyebrows rose. "Your ranch?" "My family's," he clarified. "My father started it, passed it to me and my brother last year when his health began failing." Before Ruby could respond, Mrs. Finch appeared, her thin lips pursed in disapproval. "Miss Rose, the kitchen needs those plates, not conversation." "Yes, madam," Ruby replied, hurrying away with a final glance at Quinn. Later that evening, as Ruby scrubbed pots in the kitchen, Martha nudged her conspiratorially. "That Quinn O'Malley's been asking about you," she whispered. "Handsome one, isn't he, and well-to-do?" The O'Malley Ranch is one of the largest in the county. Ruby concentrated on a particularly stubborn spot of burnt food. "I'm not interested in Mr. O'Malley's circumstances." "Girl, you'd be a fool not to be," Martha chuckled. "Single men with property don't stay single long in these parts." "I came here to work, not to find a husband," Ruby insisted. But that night, as she lay in her narrow bed, Quinn's blue eyes and gentle smile invaded her thoughts. She pushed them away, focusing instead on the comforting weight of the coins she'd already saved, hidden in a small pouch beneath her mattress. The next morning dawned with unexpected excitement. A stagecoach had been robbed 10 miles outside of town, and the passengers, a wealthy couple and their driver, had been brought to the hotel to recover from their ordeal. Ruby was assigned to tend to Mrs. Whitfield, the shaken wife, bringing her tea and hot water for washing. The woman recounted the robbery in dramatic detail, describing how masked men had stopped the coach and demanded valuables at gunpoint. "If not for that cowboy who happened along, they might have done worse than take our money," Mrs. Whitfield declared. "He shot one of the bandits and scared the others off. The sheriff's got a posse out searching for them now." "This cowboy," Ruby asked, unable to contain her curiosity. "Did you catch his name?" "O'Malley, I believe. Quite the hero." Ruby's heart quickened. Was he injured?" "A scratch on his arm. Nothing serious. He insisted on joining the posse after escorting us to town." For the remainder of the day, Ruby found herself watching the street from the hotel windows whenever possible, searching for any sign of the returning posse. It was well after nightfall when they finally rode in, tired men on dusty horses. Despite the late hour, Ruby volunteered to bring coffee to the sheriff's office where they gathered. Mrs. Finch, impressed by her initiative, agreed. The sheriff's office was crowded with weary men when Ruby arrived with the large pot of coffee and stack of cups. Quinn stood near the wall, his left sleeve torn and stained with dried blood. Their eyes met across the room, and a smile lifted the corner of his mouth. "Much obliged, Miss Rose," Sheriff Taylor said, taking the coffee. "O'Malley here could use a cup, been a long day for him." Ruby poured the coffee and brought it to Quinn, noticing the makeshift bandage on his arm. "I heard what you did," she said quietly. "That was brave." "Just happened to be in the right place," he replied modestly. Though I'll admit, I didn't expect to end the day with a bullet graze and no luck catching the rest of those outlaws. At least you saved those people. Ruby hesitated, then added, "Your arm should be properly tended." Quinn looked down at the crude bandage. "Doc Wilson's already gone to bed. It'll keep till morning." "I have some experience with minor wounds," Ruby offered. "My father taught me. If you'd like, I could clean it properly." 10 minutes later, they sat in the hotel's small parlor, thankfully empty at this late hour. Ruby carefully unwrapped the bandage, wincing at the angry red gash beneath. "It's not deep, but it needs cleaning," she assessed, reaching for the basin of warm water she'd prepared. With gentle fingers, she washed away the dried blood and dirt. "You have a healer's touch," Quinn observed, watching her work. Ruby focused on the wound, avoiding his gaze. "My father was thrown from horses more times than I can count. I learned out of necessity." "Your father was a rancher, too." "A small one," Ruby acknowledged, beginning to wrap a fresh bandage around his arm. "We had a modest spread near Helena, nothing like your operation, I imagine." "Had," Quinn noted her use of past tense. Ruby's hands stilled momentarily. "He died 3 weeks ago, heart failure." "The creditors took everything." "I'm sorry," Quinn said softly. "That's why you came here," she nodded, tying off the bandage. "The hotel position was available. I needed to start somewhere. Your mother died when I was small. It was just Papa and me." Quinn studied her face in the lamplight. "You're remarkably strong, Miss Rose. I'm practical," she corrected, gathering the soiled bandages. "There's a difference. Either way, I admire it." He stood, testing the bandage with a satisfied nod. "Thank you for this, and for the coffee." "You're welcome, Mr. O'Malley." He paused at the doorway. "About that Sunday social, the offer still stands." Ruby looked up at him, torn between caution and the growing warmth she felt in his presence. "I'll consider it," she finally said. His smile was worth the concession. Sunday arrived bright and clear. Ruby wore her best dress, faded blue calico, patched carefully at the elbows but clean and pressed. She'd spent precious time arranging her copper-colored hair, pinning it in a simple but flattering style. Quinn waited outside the hotel, looking decidedly handsome in a clean shirt and dark vest. He offered his arm with a formal bow that made Ruby laugh despite her nervousness. The social was held on the church grounds, with tables of food and a small band playing cheerful tunes. Quinn introduced Ruby to what seemed like the entire town, including his younger brother Patrick, who managed their ranch alongside him. "Quinn hasn't stopped talking about the new hotel Maid since he first saw you," Patrick confided with a mischievous grin that earned him a sharp elbow from his brother. "Ignore him," Quinn advised. "Our mother dropped him on his head as a baby." The afternoon passed pleasantly, with dancing, conversation, and more food than Ruby had seen in one place since before her father's death. Quinn was attentive but not overbearing, making sure she met people who might become friends while giving her space when she seemed overwhelmed. As the sun began to set, he suggested a walk by the creek that gave the town its name. Away from the crowd, Ruby felt both relief and a new tension in being alone with him. "I hope you enjoyed yourself today," Quinn said as they followed the narrow path along the water. "I did, very much." "Thank you for inviting me." "I've wanted to know you better since the moment I saw you walking into town," he admitted, stopping to face her. "There was something about the way you carried yourself, tired but determined. I admired that." Ruby felt her cheeks warm. "I was just doing what needed to be done." "That's what I mean," Quinn insisted. "Most people complain about their lot. You just shoulder your burden and keep moving forward." "What choice do I have?" she asked softly. "There are always choices, Ruby," he replied, using her given name for the first time. "Some people choose bitterness or despair. You chose courage." The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. For weeks, she'd been so focused on survival that she hadn't allowed herself to feel anything else. Now, standing beside this man who looked at her with such admiration, emotions she'd suppressed threatened to overflow. "I should get back," she said suddenly. "Mrs. Finch expects me early tomorrow." Quinn nodded, not pressing her. Of course. They walked back to the hotel in comfortable silence. At the rear entrance, Quinn took her hand gently. "May I call on you next Sunday as well?" Ruby hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'd like that." His smile stayed with her as she fell asleep that night. The following weeks established a pattern. Ruby worked diligently at the hotel 6 days a week, saving every penny possible. On Sundays, Quinn would appear at the hotel, sometimes taking her on picnics outside town, other times simply walking with her through the settlement, talking about everything and nothing. She learned that he was 26, that he and Patrick had worked the ranch alongside their father since boyhood, that their mother had passed 5 years earlier from influenza. He spoke of his dreams for the ranch, of breeding finer cattle, of building a legacy that would last generations. In turn, Ruby shared stories of her own upbringing, learning to cook on a wood stove at age 8, helping her father with the cattle, teaching herself to read from her mother's old books. With Quinn, she found herself laughing more than she had in years. Summer faded into autumn. The hotel grew busier as traveling salesmen and ranchers came to town for the fall cattle sales. Ruby's days grew longer, her interactions with Quinn more limited to brief moments when he would stop by the hotel on business. One rainy October evening, as Ruby cleared the dining room after the evening meal, she overheard a conversation that chilled her blood. "Those Rose Creek outlaws struck again," a traveling drummer was telling his companion. "Robbed a freight wagon carrying the Army payroll, shot 2 soldiers dead." "Sheriff got any leads?" his friend asked. "Word is they're looking hard at some of the local ranchers. Timing of the robberies coincides with cattle sales when folks wouldn't question men having extra cash." Ruby moved closer, pretending to wipe a nearby table. "They say that O'Malley outfit might be involved," the drummer continued in a lower voice. "Convenient how that younger O'Malley supposedly happened upon the stagecoach robbery back in August. Perfect cover." "That's just gossip," his companion objected. "The O'Malleys are respected around here." "Maybe so, but Sheriff Taylor was out at their place today asking questions. Where they were during the robbery, who could vouch for them, that sort of thing." Ruby's hands trembled as she gathered the remaining dishes. Quinn, an outlaw, it couldn't be possible. She knew him, his integrity, his gentle nature. Yet doubt, once planted, grew rapidly. The next day, whispers circulated throughout the town. The sheriff had questioned several ranchers, but the O'Malleys featured prominently in the gossip. Ruby found herself watching the street, hoping to see Quinn ride in to explain, to dispel these horrible rumors. He didn't come. Sunday arrived, and Ruby waited at the hotel's rear entrance at their usual meeting time. Minutes stretched into an hour. Quinn didn't appear. Worry overcame caution. Ruby approached Mrs. Finch and requested the afternoon off, claiming a headache. The woman eyed her suspiciously but agreed. Ruby changed into her warmest dress and borrowed a shawl from Martha. The O'Malley Ranch lay 3 miles outside town, a long walk, but manageable. She set out with determination, ignoring the curious glances of townspeople who saw the hotel maid heading out of town alone. The ranch came into view as she crested a hill, a substantial main house, large barn, and several outbuildings spread across well-maintained land. A herd of cattle grazed in a distant field. As Ruby approached the main house, Patrick O'Malley emerged from the barn, stopping short when he spotted her. "Miss Rose," he called, striding toward her. "What brings you all the way out here?" "I came to see Quinn," she replied, noting the dark circles under Patrick's eyes and his disheveled appearance. "Is he here?" Patrick ran a hand through his hair. "He's here, but it's not a good time. The sheriff's been asking questions, making accusations. Quinn's taking it hard." "I've heard the rumors," Ruby admitted. "I don't believe them for a second." Something in Patrick's expression shifted. "You should go back to town, Miss Rose. It's better if you're not connected to us right now." "I'm not leaving until I speak with Quinn," she insisted. Patrick studied her face, then sighed. "He's in the house. Don't say I didn't warn you." Ruby found Quinn in the study, standing by the window with a glass of whiskey in hand. He turned when she entered, surprise followed by something like shame crossing his features. "Ruby," he said hoarsely. "You shouldn't be here." "I was worried when you didn't come to town," she explained, moving closer. "I've heard what people are saying." Quinn's laugh was bitter. "And you came anyway, either you're foolish or I know you're innocent," Ruby finished firmly. He stared at her, the hard lines of his face softening. "You believe that?" "With all my heart," she replied without hesitation. "You're a good man, Quinn O'Malley. I've never doubted that." He set down his glass and crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "The sheriff came yesterday. Someone told him Patrick and I were away from the ranch during both robberies. We were moving cattle to the north pasture, no witnesses except our ranch hands who the sheriff says would lie for us." "What can I do?" Ruby asked. "Nothing, just knowing you believe in me." He squeezed her hands. "It means everything." They talked for hours, Ruby listening as Quinn explained the evidence against them, circumstantial but troubling. The real outlaws had been clever, timing their robberies when many ranchers would be away from their properties on legitimate business. "The sheriff's not a bad man," Quinn concluded. "He's doing his job, but if they don't find the real culprits soon, Patrick and I could face serious trouble." As evening approached, Ruby reluctantly prepared to return to town. Quinn insisted on saddling a horse to take her back. "I can't have you walking alone at dusk," he said firmly. "It's not safe." The ride back was quiet, both lost in their thoughts. At the edge of town, Quinn helped Ruby dismount, his hands lingering at her waist. "Thank you for coming today," he said softly. "For believing in me." "Always," she whispered on impulse. She rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his. Quinn's arms encircled her, drawing her closer as the kiss deepened. When they finally parted, his eyes held a new intensity. "Be careful," Ruby warned. "People are watching, and with these rumors, let them watch," Quinn replied fiercely. "I've done nothing wrong, and I won't act as if I have." The following week brought increasing tension to Miller's Creek. More whispers, more suspicious glances directed at Ruby when she was seen in town. Mrs. Finch called her into the small office behind the reception desk on Wednesday morning. "Your association with the O'Malley boy is causing talk," the older woman said bluntly. "I run a respectable establishment. I can't have my staff embroiled in scandal." Ruby straightened her spine. "Mr. O'Malley is innocent of any wrongdoing, madam." "That may be," Mrs. Finch allowed, "but perception matters in my business. I'm not asking you to end your friendship merely to be more discreet. No more Sunday walks through the center of town." The message was clear. Choose between her job and Quinn. Ruby nodded stiffly and returned to her duties, mind racing. That evening, as Ruby scrubbed the dining room floor, Sheriff Taylor entered the hotel. He nodded to her politely before disappearing into Mrs. Finch's office. 20 minutes later, he emerged and approached her directly. "Miss Rose, might I have a word?" Ruby wiped her hands on her apron, heart pounding. "Of course, Sheriff." "I understand you've become quite friendly with Quinn O'Malley," he began, his tone professionally neutral. "We are friends, yes. Were you aware of his whereabouts during the payroll robbery last week? Say between noon and 3 o'clock on Tuesday?" Ruby hesitated. She hadn't seen Quinn that day, but lying to the sheriff would only make matters worse. "I was working here at the hotel all day, Sheriff. I didn't see Mr. O'Malley." Sheriff Taylor nodded, unsurprised. "If he should happen to mention anything about that day, I'd appreciate hearing about it." "Are you asking me to spy on him?" Ruby asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. "I'm asking you to be a good citizen," the sheriff corrected. "These robberies have left good men dead, Miss Rose. Think about that." After he left, Ruby leaned against the wall, trembling. The situation was worsening, and she felt helpless to stop it. Friday morning brought unexpected excitement to the hotel. A cattle buyer from Kansas City arrived with his wife, a fashionable woman who requested Ruby specifically as her lady's maid during their stay. Mrs. Fielding was demanding but generous, and by Sunday morning, Ruby found herself with an unexpected silver dollar as a tip for pressing Mrs. Fielding's extensive wardrobe. With her day off and a silver dollar in her pocket, Ruby decided to visit the general store before meeting Quinn. She had just selected a small bottle of lavender cologne and extravagance, but one she felt she deserved after weeks of hard work when the door burst open. Patrick O'Malley stood there, breathless and pale. "Ruby, thank God I found you. You need to come quick, it's Quinn." "What's happened?" she demanded, abandoning her purchase. "The Rose Creek gang hit again the bank this time. Quinn tried to stop them. He's been shot." The world tilted beneath Ruby's feet. He's alive," Patrick assured her, taking her elbow to steady her. "Doc Wilson's with him now at our place." "Quinn's asking for you." They rode double on Patrick's horse, galloping out of town as curious onlookers stared. Ruby clung to Patrick's back, praying silently with each hoofbeat. At the ranch, Patrick led her straight to Quinn's bedroom. Quinn lay pale against white sheets, his shoulder bandaged but his eyes clear. Relief flooded his face when he saw Ruby. "Leave us, Pat," he requested, his voice weaker than normal but steady. When they were alone, Quinn extended his good hand to Ruby. She took it, fighting tears. "What happened?" she asked. "I was in town to deposit some money from our cattle sale," Quinn explained. "4 men rode up and stormed into the bank, guns drawn. I was coming out just as they entered. One of them recognized me. I could see it in his eyes." Ruby squeezed his hand encouragingly. "He shot at me first," Quinn continued. "I managed to draw and fire back before I was hit, got him in the leg. The others grabbed him and fled, but not before I recognized one of them." Ruby's breath caught. "Who was it?" "James Conway. Works for the Henderson spread. I've known him for years." Quinn's expression hardened. "Sheriff's gone out there now with a posse. The wounded one won't get far." "This will clear your name," Ruby realized. Quinn nodded. "That's why I needed to see you, to tell you it's over. The suspicion, the danger, it's done." The relief was overwhelming. Ruby bent and pressed her forehead to their joined hands, finally allowing tears to fall. "I was so afraid," she whispered. "Ruby," Quinn said, his voice suddenly tender. "There's something else." She looked up, wiping her tears. "Nearly dying makes a man think about what's important," he continued. "I've known for weeks now, but I was waiting for the right moment. Then today, looking down the barrel of that gun, I realized there's no guarantee of tomorrow. Quinn, I love you, Ruby Rose. I've loved you since I watched you walk into town with your head held high despite whatever hardships you'd faced." The words she'd been afraid to acknowledge, even to herself, hung between them. Ruby's heart pounded. "When I was lying in the street, bleeding," Quinn went on, "all I could think was that I might die without telling you, without asking you to be my wife." Ruby stared at him, stunned. "Your wife?" With his good arm, Quinn reached beneath his pillow and produced a small gold ring with a single pearl. "It was my mother's. She made me promise to give it only to a woman of true strength and character." His blue eyes held hers. "That's you, Ruby." He held out the ring. "I'm not offering charity or rescue. I'm offering partnership. I'm saying you're mine if you'll have me, and I'm yours completely." Ruby looked at the ring, then at Quinn's earnest face. The wall she'd built around her heart since her father's death crumbled completely. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Quinn O'Malley, I will be your wife." His smile was brighter than sunrise as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "It fits," he noted with satisfaction. "Perfect," Ruby agreed, bending to seal their promise with a kiss. The Henderson gang, as they came to be known, were captured within 2 days. James Conway confessed to all 3 robberies, clearing Quinn's name completely. The town that had whispered behind their hands now celebrated the O'Malley brothers as heroes. Ruby gave notice at the hotel, though Mrs. Finch surprisingly expressed regret at losing her. "You're a good worker," the older woman acknowledged. "I hope married life doesn't soften that backbone of yours." Their wedding took place in November, a simple ceremony in the town church followed by a celebration at the O'Malley ranch. Ruby wore a new dress of deep blue wool, and Quinn stood tall beside her, his wounded arm still in a sling but healing well. As they exchanged vows, Ruby thought of how far she had come since that dusty summer day when she'd walked into Miller's Creek with nothing but determination and a carpetbag. She had sought only wages and found instead a home, a family, and a love stronger than any hardship. That night, as Quinn's wife, Ruby stood on the porch of what was now her home. Quinn's arms encircled her from behind, his chin resting on her head. "Happy?" he asked softly. Ruby turned in his embrace, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "Completely," she answered truthfully. "Good," Quinn smiled, "because this is just the beginning." And as stars appeared in the vast Montana sky, Ruby knew he was right. Their story, born of hardship, tested by suspicion, sealed with courage, was indeed just beginning. But whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, just as they had faced all that came before, with determination, faith, and an enduring love that had proven stronger than circumstance. The ring on her finger caught the lamplight from the window, the pearl glowing softly. "You're mine," Quinn had said, offering not possession but partnership. And in the sanctuary of his arms, Ruby had found not just security but the freedom to dream again of a future built with love, trust, and the promise of tomorrow.